Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 215 of the Sophie Art Podcast, which is a little podcast I do about the art and things. And today what I'm going to be talking about is, I'm going to name this one, Artists Beware, The Mind Lies. And, co-host lilDENNiS is with us. I think we're going to have fun on this one, because what's happened is, the last week, I've been going through some of my old blog posts on the website, looking at a load of art, and what I've noticed is, I need a drink. What I've noticed is, a lot of the art that I thought was rubbish, it wasn't as rubbish as I thought it was. So I thought it'd be quite interesting to talk about it, because I've been trying to work out what it is that creates that, and I'm also going to talk about the mind, how the mind creates reality and things. So lilDENNiS is going to get us straight into this one. Bing! He's excited, he is. So little Kitty and Dennis kisses. They enjoyed that. They definitely enjoyed that one. So, I've got some notes for this one. You can also see this as a video if you wanted. I'll put links and everything in the show notes. But the notes I've got for this is, I'm going to talk about updating the blog and how I was looking at art with fresh eyes. So what I've noticed is, when you look at something with fresh eyes, even if it's the next day, I've noticed this before as well, like you do a drawing or something and you're struggling with it, the next day you look at it, fresh eyes, you see it completely different, and sometimes it allows you to see what's wrong with it, which you couldn't see at the time. It's almost like you're too attached to it. So I'm going to talk about fresh eyes. I'm going to talk about reasons why I think the mind might be lying, like certain areas where I notice that the mind lies to me a lot more. I'm also going to talk about how looking at old artwork is like looking through photo albums, which I think is cool. I'm going to talk about the thing about how art has really showed me. The main thing, it's one of the main things it's shown me, which I started realising right from the beginning, really. When I was learning the book from the book, Betty Edwards' book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, I started to realise that what the reality we see, it can actually be manipulated just by looking at things differently. Like shifting your perception, that's it. Shifting your awareness onto different things changes your perception. So I'm going to talk about that as well. I'm also going to talk about, because I got quite sad a couple of days ago, because I suddenly realised, I started thinking, what if some of the things that I've done in the past, like things I've turned down, opportunities, what if I turned them down because the mind tricked me into thinking. So this goes a lot deeper than just looking at artwork. It goes into actual things to do with things you're doing which could help you in your art. Like even say, for instance, not going to art class, you might come up with a valid reason, you think it's a valid reason, like the mind might make you think you're not going to art class because, I don't know, let's say they're painting flowers or something. You might think, I'm not going to that because I'm not interested in that. But the real reason is, maybe you think you struggle with it because you don't normally draw flowers. Yeah. So in actual fact, it would have been positive. It would have been a good thing to have gone and drawn the flowers, because you would have put yourself out your comfort zone. And then I'm also going to talk about things I've done where the mind has actually said negative things. I've done it anyway, and I've sort of took the power away from the mind. And I've also put the word awareness, because I feel like the word awareness, I think awareness is what it's all about, to be honest. Awareness is a very powerful skill. But the funny thing is, you almost sometimes need an awareness of having an awareness, like fractals somehow. And then I've also got the quote for this week. It's coming from a book called Draw People in 15 Minutes by the artist Jack Spicer. But this book's brilliant. I might talk about that a little bit as well. But if we get into this, so Well, I'll start with the thing of looking at my old artwork. So what happened was, the past week I've started going back through my website, updating all the blog posts, because there's about 70 posts that I need to edit. Now the thing is, it's quite a hard. It's not so much hard. It's just really repetitive. So I've been putting it off a little bit, to be honest. Because what happens is, as well, after a few days, I get quite exhausted from it. But what happened was, and I loved this. So some of the things I got on the blog is my Inktober 2018 and 2019 drawings, Cats of June drawings, which is an art challenge all about drawing cats. And then another one, Draw Every Day, where I did a drawing every day for a year of little characters from my imagination. So all of these things they've all been images or drawings or paintings, because the other one was 30 painting challenge, where you have to do 30 paintings in 30 days, one painting a day. So I'd never done any painting before that. When we're drawing the characters from my imagination, I'd never really done that before. Inktober, I'd never really played around with inks before. And what was the other one? The Cats of June. Yeah, I don't normally draw cats either. Yeah, like cartoony cats. So all of those they were all art challenges where I was putting myself out of my comfort zone. And what I've noticed is, if you're doing something which you're not comfortable with, there's more chance that the mind will say negative things. Because for me at least, if I'm doing something and I'm not 100% sure I can do it, as I'm drawing it sometimes, the mind will be saying, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to mess this up or something, or it's rubbish or something. So even as I'm drawing it, there's these mind attacks going on. But what happens is, I just keep doing it, and in the end, the mind attacks go away. But what will happen is, you finish your drawing, sometimes you'll look at it and you'll think that's a load of rubbish. But then what happens, so that the mind will convince you that it's rubbish. So it's almost as if it's trying to sort of, for me it feels like it's trying to sabotage me, to stop me from doing it again. So let's say I've drawn a drawing of a little cat, a character from my imagination of a cat, and the mind said it's rubbish. Next day when I sit down to do another one, in my head it might be saying, the last one was rubbish. And if it keeps doing that, in the end, it's like if somebody keeps being horrible to you, in the end you just you're not going to stand around forever. Yeah. So it can actually put you off. But it's a lie. It's almost like the mind knows that if you keep doing this, you're going to get better. So I'm trying to work out, why is it that the mind seems almost like it's programmed to sort of... It's almost like programmed, or the mind's default state is negative. It might also be because you're putting yourself out of your comfort zone, trying something new, there's a lot of fear and anxiety, and maybe that what's happening is the mind is trying to protect you from failing. So it says it's rubbish so that you won't do it again, so that you're not going to fail. But the thing is, you've got to fail. But it's not really a failure if you're trying to get better. So this is where the awareness comes in. The minute the mind says something negative, you've got to say, well, I'm doing my best. Now, I did that with my pencil drawings. I remember when I first started doing my realistic pencil drawings, the mind attacks were crazy. Funnily enough, right at the very start, it wasn't that bad. But I think because I had no skills at all, there was nothing. Because that's another thing. If you get really quite good at something, and then you try to do something else, because that other thing isn't. Let's say you're quite good at doing realistic pencil drawings, but you've never done paintings before, oil paintings. Your skills in the oil painting are going to be a lot lower. So already you've got this thing of you've got to accept that you're not going to be as good as what you normally are with your realistic pencils. So already you're sort of compromising yourself, I suppose. and there's a part of you that wants to play it safe, stay with what you're good at. So there's a lot of mind. For me, what I'm noticing is drawing, so much of it is mind. And if the mind gets hold of you in a negative way, it can actually completely derail your progress, which I do wonder sometimes if that's happened to me. But the other thing is, if you can sort of see what's happening, you can actually realise it's a positive. The reason the mind is doing this is actually because you're trying to do something that you're not good at because you've not done it before. And the only way to get good at it is to do it. So it's this weird thing where it's almost like you've almost got to accept these mind lies through the process. But what happened was, when I was updating my website, looking at all these images, this is where it comes into like a photo album. I'm looking at these images and I can remember where I was when I was drawing them, all the rest of it. But I can remember at the time thinking, there's some of my drawings, like especially my little Sophie character. What I did was, for Inktober 2018, I was doing like master studies of other artists' work, and I went through some of my art books and got some other artists' like characters and things. And what I did was I tried to recreate the other artist's character, but as a little Sophie, which is my character. So I tried to sort of take the essence of the other artist's work, but create something new with my little Sophie. Now, I did that for 30 days, every day for Inktober, and I remember all the time I did it, I kept thinking, I was always thinking, this ain't very good. Now, I've gone back through, what is it now? It's like 4 years later, and I've been looking at these old Inktober images, and I realised that these little Sophies were actually, they're not amazing, but they're a lot better than what I had thought they was. Because what happened is, as well, it definitely put me off, because I thought I'm not very good at this. And so instead of working through that and getting good at it, I let the lies trick me, and I basically didn't do it enough. So it definitely put me off, like doing more little Sophies. But the funny thing is, all of it's like that. I remember when I did my 1330 painting challenge, which was doing these little paintings, especially the robins. I got these paintings I did of robins, because the robin is my spirit animal. One of them I really liked. I've actually got it on my wall, but the other ones I thought were rubbish. I've gone back and looked at them, and they're not as bad as I thought they was. So the thing is, it's like one thing I'm thinking is because what I've put in my notes is, if the process hits problems, then what's happening is, I feel like what happens is, let's say you're doing a drawing and you get to the face and you're really struggling to do the face, and you keep erasing it, and you spend like 5 hours just trying to get the face looking right. There's a strong chance there that you're going to actually not be enjoying the process. So what happens is, by the end of the drawing, you've got this negative feeling of almost like you're sort of glad it's over. But you've got this negative feeling where you're convinced that the face isn't right. So what's happened now is the process, because the process had problems, it's created a negative feeling in the mind. So you've got bad feelings about it. So if you then don't look at your art for another year, go back and look at it, all those emotions that you were feeling, you've not got those anymore. You forgot about those. All you've got left is the finished artwork. And when you look at it, you're seeing it with fresh eyes. So you're actually seeing it for what it really is. And what I've noticed is, a lot of those ones, I sort of think, it's actually a lot better than I thought it was. So it's quite funny, really. But so that's the first thing. I think, when I struggle the most with the mind saying negative things, is when I'm out of my comfort zone, trying something new, but also if I'm sort of struggling with the process. And the funny thing about that is, if you're doing something out of your comfort zone, there's more chance that you're going to be struggling with the process. So I think this all goes together. So this is where it comes into an awareness. It's almost like you've got to start the drawing saying to yourself, this might not be the best thing I ever do. No, I don't know. What I think is it's probably a good idea to start a drawing saying, I'm going to do my best. The mind is going to attack me. I'll listen to it, because sometimes the mind will say something negative and it actually is worth listening to. Like it might say something like, oh, those eyes ain't looking good. And then when you look at it, you actually notice that the eyes are a bit off. So it's this thing of listening to the mind and taking. It's almost like you need to listen to the mind, but not get attached to it, and take the bits out that's going to help you. But no, for me at least, a large part of the mind as I'm drawing is negative. Even when I'm doing these podcasts, sometimes I'm doing this podcast and I'm talking, and I'm focused on talking, but at the same time there's something in my head that is saying negative things. Like now, my mum's out in the passage, I can hear her. So as I'm talking, it's almost like there's multiple awarenesses inside of me, and I can focus on talking in the podcast, but I can also become aware of the mind saying negative things as I'm talking. But I can keep talking through it, and then that'll go away. But sometimes, if that comes in, like if the negative thought comes in, it can actually start sort of distracting you. Because what it can do is, let's say I'm talking about something, and the mind says, you don't know what you're talking about here. You could actually stop talking about what you were talking about, and if you had just kept going, you could have come out with something really amazing. So it's almost like you've got to keep talking, even when the mind is saying these negative things. It's the same with the drawing. You've got to keep drawing, even when the mind is saying negative things. So it's mad, it is, but I really want to know why the mind is so negative a lot of the time. It's weird. So I put in my notes, if the process hits problems, you're more likely to feel like the drawing is not good at the end. So this is quite interesting. The next bit I've put is old art is like photo albums. I love this, because as I was going through these blog posts, like I said, I could remember everything. I had it before as well. Like if you go through study notes, and that's like my Keys to Drawing book. Keys to Drawing by Bert Dodson is one of my favourite art books. Whenever I go through the drawings that I did, because throughout that book you're getting these little exercises, and you've got to do little drawings, like basic things like drawing your feet or something. And what happens is, as I look through these drawings, it's as if I get teleported back to that moment, and I can remember everything. Very much like when you look at a photograph. If you take photographs somewhere, like you go on holiday or something, take a photo, you look at the photo, it's like you're reminiscing. Well, drawings do the same thing. It's quite cool. I just think there's something about that I really like. Because the other thing is, it makes you realise that what you're doing at the moment, in the future, you're going to look back and remember things. It's cool. So the next thing I put in my notes is, art shows how reality is all about perception. So this is the other thing. When I've finished one of these drawings that I had a bad process with and had negative thoughts about, the mind could convince me that that the drawing looked rubbish. So it did look rubbish, because I believed it looked rubbish. Because what's probably happened is, the mind has made me focus on the negative bits. So like for instance, if I did struggle with the eyes and I just couldn't get them right, when I finish the drawing, all I'm going to be looking at is the bits I did wrong or that I couldn't fix. So I'll forget about everything else. Whereas when you come back with the fresh eyes, you're actually looking at the whole thing and you can see the beauty of it. And sometimes the funny thing is, even those negative things that straight after the drawing made you not like the drawing, in the future they might be the best thing ever, because if you can learn from it. And then what happens is you might look back and say, I remember this one, I messed up the eyes, but this is the thing that allowed me to focus on drawing eyes. So in a strange way, that thing that was negative now becomes super positive. It's quite cool. But the thing about this is, when I was learning from Betty Edwards' book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, what I began to realise was how reality is an illusion. So the cool thing is, lucid dreaming really shows you how everything is. Well, actually, I had a dream last night, a lucid dream. What happened was I woke up in bed, and I looked out my door, and my mum was there. And then I went to put the light on because it was night time. The light didn't work. I realised I was dreaming. I could not believe that I was dreaming. It was one of those false awakenings. And then I woke myself up. No, I didn't. I put myself into a out-of-body type sort of experience. But what I'm saying is, in that dream, I was convinced it was real. And if I hadn't tried the light switch, it would have been real until I woke up. But the same thing goes on in the waking state. So the way that this works in the waking state, for me, is little things like, for instance, let's say there's somebody who, let's say you've got two people, so you've got yourself and two other people. Now these two people have got problems with each other, but you haven't got any problems with either of them. Now what happens is, the first person comes up to you and starts slagging off the second person, or this is a better one. Let's say somebody's wearing pink shorts. Yeah, pink shorts and like a blue top or something. And then somebody comes up to you and says, "Look at that bloke wearing the pink shorts." Now the thing is, if they hadn't said that, you might not have noticed it. But because they've said that bloke's wearing pink shorts, you will not be able to not see the pink shorts. In other words, because somebody's put your awareness onto the pink shorts, you now can't see them. Now this is a positive thing in drawing, like the things with the negative shapes, the negative space. Everything has got negative spaces because everything's interconnected, but you can't see it until you know that you're supposed to look for it. And then what happens then is, you can't not see it. You can't not see the negative shapes between things. It was always there, but you couldn't see it. So again, and what this is for me is, this is about your perception. If your perception is on the object, you're only going to see the object. If your perception is on the thing around the object, you're only going to see the thing around the object. So in other words, this is an awareness again. You have to become aware of the things in this reality, and then you can start seeing them. But it becomes like a sort of an illusion in a strange way. One of the things in that Betty Edwards book I remember was, she said so the world is 3D, when we look out it's 3D, but there is a way. She uses this sheet, she gets a sheet of perspex or glass, which you can see through, and then you draw the world in 3D. So you draw like the edges of houses or something, like houses that are in front of each other and trees and all the rest of it. You can actually flatten the image, so you can actually turn reality into 2D. Somebody else, it was David Hone, did this as well, like cubes. If you're struggling to draw cubes, if you get a sheet of glass and draw the cube on the sheet of glass, you can actually turn the 3D cube into a 2D shape, which is a good way to study the shapes and things. But the funny thing about this is, you start realising that in a strange way, it's everything, because what happens now is, you can actually get yourself to look at things and almost like flatten it. So you can sort of somehow flatten flatten reality. It's really weird. But that book was full of loads of these things. Yeah. I can't remember any of the other ones, but there was loads of them. Because as I was reading through that book, I kept thinking to myself, this is really weird how, like, the other thing, like, for instance, I remember drawing, who was it? I remember drawing one of my pencil drawings, and it was somebody who I had looked at like hundreds of times. I'd looked at them all the time. When I sat down to draw them, because when you're drawing, you really see, you really see them. When you're drawing, you really see the truth. So all of a sudden, I noticed little things like this person had a tattoo, which I'd never seen before, because it's this other thing about when you're looking at something, your mind actually is filtering stuff out. So you're only really seeing things that you're focusing on, even though everything else is there. So what you've got to do is bring yourself back and actually be able to look at everything. That's what happens when you're drawing. It forces you to see everything. Which kind of goes into that thing about the mind lying. The mind can use that to make you only focus on negative things. So, like, the way I look at it is like, we're in the physical, we've got these objects like a hand with negative shapes in between the fingers. So, and you've got to train yourself to put your awareness on, like, whatever you put your awareness on is what you're going to see. So you can either see the finger or the negative shape, but you get to a point where you can see both at the same time. But this is actually going on in the mind as well. So the mind is going to basically pull, at least for me, it pulls me most of the time to focus on negative. But the positive exists as well. So what I've got to do is put my awareness onto the positive, because everything is negative and positive at the same time. So whilst the mind at the end of a drawing might, or even during the drawing process, might be throwing negative things at me, all I've got to do is flip the awareness to positive. So if I'm sitting here drawing and I'm trying to draw, say, a little character, and the mind says, you're rubbish, you're rubbish. I can say, no, I'm not rubbish. Well, I might be rubbish, but it's more that I'm struggling because I'm out of my comfort zone. That's a positive way to look at it. So it's kind of like, for me, it does feel like I'm very much at this point where I feel like there's like two sort of energies in me. I'm very aware of how the mind. I'm very aware of what the mind is saying, but I'm still quite sort of attached to what the mind is saying. I haven't yet been able to separate myself fully, especially with doing things like drawings and making videos and things. This also goes into the thing I talked about last week with the fear of rejection, because that is all about the mind. The mind is focusing on negative things. So this is why for me, like, a large part of being an artist is understanding the mind. Because for me, you've got two things as an artist, I think. You've got to learn the skills, technical skills, but you've got to basically, I was going to say the word control, but I don't think it is that. But you've got to understand the mind. There's a large part of, for me, being an artist that is a psychological thing. So this is quite interesting. But it can be quite hard work as well. But I don't think it has to be. But that's where I'm at the minute. So what I love about art is how it is basically art started to make me see reality differently, and then lucid dreaming and art, they're sort of, for me, they're doing the same thing. They're breaking the illusion. And they're both very powerful because you can actually manipulate reality, or at least you can manipulate perceptions with artwork. is cool. So the next thing I wanted to say was things I've turned down in the past versus things I've done. So, well, there's loads of these. Going to my first art exhibition, especially when I went as Sophie. So when I transitioned into Sophie, I remember the first art exhibition I had to go to, I was like really scared. Now the mind was saying all these negative things about, basically it was, I look at it now, it was rejection. It was saying that nobody's going to accept you as Sophie, and it was just bombarding me with negative thoughts and things. Now I quite easily could have said, I can't do this, and not gone to it, but I didn't. I went to it, I felt all these negative things, and when I come home I realised that it was all lies. It's mad, but the thing is, the only way you can realise that something is a lie is to do it. It's almost like you got to turn everything into an experiment. So that's the thing. That's the secret, I think, is to see everything as an experiment. Because if a thing is an experiment, it can fail, because it doesn't matter. An experiment is supposed to fail or succeed, and if it fails, you just do another experiment, and you keep doing it, different experiments, until it succeeds. But even when an experiment succeeds, you still have to do another experiment, because experiments are like stacked on top of each other. So it's like drawing. Like what I'm noticing is, what I've realised is, this is why it's so important to get on top of the mind, because as an artist, no matter what level you're at, the mind is always going to be throwing negative things in there. Because like it starts out, you're struggling with drawing because you've not done it before. The mind is going to be saying negative things. Once you get quite good at drawing, at some point you've sort of taken the power away from the mind, because you've gone through it. So now you know that you're quite good at drawing. The mind can say something negative. It can't actually control you enough, or it can't put you off as much, unless you're doing a drawing of something you've not done before. So this is what I'm saying. No matter what you're doing in art, as long as you're trying new things, the mind is always going to be there to put you off. So this is why I feel like I would almost say, for me at the moment, which is what I've been doing for the last few years, it's more important for me to focus on my mind than it is learning new art skills. But then the other thing is, like I got this quote that I made up, art will set you free. Because I was thinking this morning, what if this is actually one of the lies? What if my mind has tricked me into focusing on my mind without focusing on my art? Because it knows that if I focus on my art, that's how I can actually overcome the mind. So in actual fact, it's like it's a sneaky way of the mind making me stay focused on the mind, which is, it could be a never-ending circle of like overcoming something but still not overcoming it properly, if that makes sense, because it's like onions, layers of onions. So maybe sometimes you just do the drawing, the mind throws all these negative things at you, you keep doing the drawing no matter what. At some point you get so good at what you're doing that the mind can say something but you can just laugh at it. The mind says something negative, you can say, well, I know you're lying, because this is what I've done here is quite good. So there is an element of confidence needed as well, and like self-belief. So another one of my things is, I sort of struggle to say positive things about me. It's that thing of, I remember in the old days, if I did a drawing and somebody said, that's good, I would actually shake my head to say no. Even if somehow some part of me knew that it was quite good, it's almost like I couldn't accept compliments. So this is how deep it goes. I think I've got over that one. Because like now when people say nice things, what happens for me is, if somebody says something nice about something I've done, initially there'll be that thing of push it away, but I can actually now see it. So instead of just saying no, because I remember people used to say, "Oh, that's a good drawing, Kevin," because I was Kevin at the time, and I'd say, "No, it's not." Now what happens there is you're rejecting the other person's compliment, and in the end the person will stop saying something nice to you, because every time they do, you're pushing it away. So again, this is how complex it is. The mind says something negative inside your head, which then makes you create a negative action of pushing other people away, which will now stop other people giving you compliments. So again, it's this thing about awareness. Somebody gives you a compliment, you need to say, no, that is actually a nice thing. So what I do now is, if somebody says, that's a nice thing you've done there, I might get an initial feeling of, no, it's not, because I'm actually focusing on all the things I did wrong. But what I do now is I'm aware of the mind saying something negative, but I'll just say thank you to the person. So it's almost like you're accepting the compliment, which, again, this is what it does is, in the end, it lowers the power of the mind. But it's quite interesting actually how I've got lots of body language things. I've noticed that as well, like anxiety things. If I get anxious, my eyebrows will start doing all these weird things. It's almost like the negative energy of the anxiety has to come out in my body, which is quite weird. Yeah. So the thing with that is, what I'm noticing is the mind and the physical are linked. It's cool, but this is how powerful art is. Think about this. I started out drawing just for fun, and what's happened is it's taken me on this sort of deep inner journey of the mind. So when if I look at myself 10 years ago, I'm a completely different person. Like 10 years ago, I was suffering from OCD, absolutely mental OCD. Like, it would make me do some stupid stuff. Again, at the time I knew it was stupid, but the power of that negative thought of the OCD was so much that I believed it. So for instance, I'd walk down the street and there'd be like a lamppost, and the mind would say, right, you've got to walk on the right side of the lamppost, even if the gap was like tiny, which is stupid. Or it would make me go right across the other side of the road to walk, I don't know, it was mad, it was. Another one was I'd come home from work and the mind says, right, you're not allowed to open your eyes until you've got upstairs in your bedroom and put the light on. The thing was, it would say something like, something bad will happen if you don't eat all these, like I used to have to like eat cakes or something, or biscuits, or my dinner in a certain order. And it would say, like, if you don't do this, something bad will happen. And it really felt real. This is another thing about, like, I'm convinced the mind is like some sort of computer which is rendering reality. It's almost like the mind is rendering reality. It's not that we're inside of it, it's that it's actually rendering it. So if you can change your thoughts, and all that is putting your awareness on different thoughts, reality changes. Because the mind, whatever thought you're focused on in the mind, that becomes reality. So for me, I see it as like it's like the mind is a computer generating reality. It's weird, but the way I got over that OCD was, I said, I watched something on Channel 4 about OCD, and it said, because somebody said, it was somebody eating blue Skittles, and they said I think they weren't allowed to eat the blue Skittles because the mind said, if you do, something bad will happen. Now, how stupid is that? And the thing is, a lot of these things, you know it's stupid, but you feel like it's so real, you've got to do it. And then this bloke, this like therapist bloke on this program, he said, because she said, something bad might happen, and he said, yeah, something bad might happen, but it might not. Now, that changed my life, that did, because what happened then was, if I was walking down the road and the mind says, right, you've got to walk on this pink pavement, you're only allowed to walk on the pink pavements, otherwise something bad will happen, I could say, I started saying, yeah, but it might not, and I would walk on the grey pavement stones, and then nothing bad happened. So what you were doing was, you were challenging the mind, and again, you took the power away from it, just by your little action of saying no. But again, why did the mind do that? Why did the mind, because for like at least, I would say 20 to 30 years of my life was controlled by this OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It really did, for me, it ruined a lot of things in my life. And it would have me doing other things, like I'd have to count my fingers in a certain order, which was quite tricky to do. And if I counted the fingers in the wrong order, I had to go right back to the beginning and start again. So sometimes I'll be there for like 20 minutes, just like counting my fingers in this weird order. So it is weird, but I suppose it's quite funny really how the mind has a lot of power. So, like I said, 10 years ago I had this OCD, social anxiety, panic attacks. I'd never done any drawing. I wasn't spiritual at all. I knew something was weird in the world, but I didn't know you could go out of body and all the rest of it. But I knew that there was something much bigger than what was. In other words, I think I knew that reality wasn't what you thought it was. Very much like the Matrix. I remember watching that Matrix and just thinking, this is onto something here. But I didn't go any further with it because I never realised. I always thought that spiritual stuff was religious, like religion. And because I knew that religion was all about control and negative, I never really looked into it. What happened for me was, because when I started drawing and I started realising how I had all these mental issues that I could see that they were going to really hold me back and limit me unless I started facing them. And ever since I've been like working on all these things in my mind, and I've done a lot of progress. One of the first things that happened was, because I actually thought, right, I've got to basically try to understand the mind to help me become a better artist. Which, in a strange way, it's almost like you've got to sacrifice getting better as an artist in the short term, in the hopes that you'll get better in the long term. Well, what happened was I found this bloke called Lama Marut. Now, it turns out he actually died a few years ago, but he changed my life as well. He was a spiritual, like a monk. Now, the cool thing about him was, here was a bloke who was saying this really deep stuff, and he was basically saying, one of his main things that I remembered was, he said something along the lines of, if there's something you can do about it, do something about it. If there's nothing you can do about it, there's nothing you can do about it. Which is all about accepting the present moment. But again, because how many times would I sit there worrying about something, and when you sit and think, right, if there's something I can do about it, do something about it. If there's nothing I can do about it, there's nothing I can do about it. So what that does is it allows you to let go of stuff. Because if, let's say, for instance, you're sitting here worrying about a wobbly chair leg or something, is there something you can do about it? Yeah, you can put something underneath it in that moment, so that's gone now. If, however, the wobbly chair leg, you can't fix it, then you don't have to worry about it. You just accept it. And you start realising that so much of life is like that. So much of life is spent focusing on stuff that you can't do anything about anyway. So that's a waste of energy. And then a lot of it is also spent on worrying about something where if you actually sat and thought about it, you could do something about it, like really quickly. So in other words, both of those, you're wasting energy. You're either wasting energy on something that you can't do anything about, or you're wasting energy on thinking about something that you can sort out really quickly. Now, I'm guilty of this as well, like the interviewing guests on the podcast. It's not as simple as that though, because it is multi-layered again. Because what happens is you've got all these fears. So this is why it's quite a struggle. It's quite a struggle to get to the root of issues. That's what I'm finding. And there's a lot of things I've got over, which I've got over on a certain level, and then as I start facing other things in my life, I overcome them. I start realising these two things that were separate are actually linked together. So it's almost like the mind is like a massive. I see the mind and like thoughts and negative thoughts especially. I see them as like a spider web in the head. So I see them as like you've got a negative thought, which is connected to a deeper negative thought. And so that one negative thought could have loads of negative thoughts coming off it, and then one of those could have thoughts coming off it as well. So it's quite interesting. Yeah, it's cool. So some of the things I've turned down in the past. Well, I could have had my art. I had my art. Well, this is it. Look. So I had my art in an art gallery. Now the mind kept saying, you can't do it or something. But I did it because I wanted to do it. The funny thing was, when I did it, I realised I didn't need to do it. But there's other things where I've had like lots of opportunities to do things, which I've said no to, which in the moment I thought was the right thing. But I look back at them now and I wonder whether, in actual fact, was this the mind tricking me into... Because it goes quite deep, actually. It's quite a deep thing, this one. It should probably be a separate podcast, but the mind, especially the negative mind, it can present something to you and convince you that it's acting out of love, I suppose. It's only in the future you look back and realise it was actually fear. So one of them for me was, I got offered this opportunity to do realistic pencil drawings of animals in like an art gallery, and I said no. Now I'm still not 100% sure about this. I said no because I didn't want. This was just as I was starting to go into drawing little characters, and I didn't want to spend my life doing realistic pencil drawings. But there's another part of me that thinks I should have said yes to that, and just seen where it took me. But this is the other thing, isn't it? Life's all about these decisions. You make a decision and you go off in one direction. You make another decision, you're off in another direction. But I'm convinced, in a strange way, all your decisions are going to end up going back to the same point again. So it's almost, to me, it's like our life is going to be like a diamond shape. We start out at the beginning, we've got the end point, and like life is all your decisions are inside of a diamond. So all you're doing really is just making all these different decisions which you think are important. And like one decision might take you all the way up the left hand side of the diamond, but you're always going to end up at the end, in the centre of it. It's almost like you're getting funneled into your destiny. That's what I'm thinking. So that's it. I think that's it for this one. I feel like I rambled a lot, but the main thing is how the mind lies, and you only really see it with fresh eyes or an awareness. So one way to look at it is give it a year and look, and you'll see the truth, which is that the mind was lying, or understand that this is happening, so that when the mind starts lying in the moment, you can say, you can say you're lying, or just say, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm doing what I want to do because I believe it's the right thing to do. But it's this other thing about discernment as well, because like I said, sometimes the mind is trying to guide you, so it does get a bit complicated. But lilDENNiS has said it's game over, sunshine, for this one. I hope you enjoyed this one. And it's funny as well that I've put the word fresh eyes, because one of the things I struggle with is eyes, drawing eyes. But that's it for this one. Please let me know what you think about this, because sometimes I do think that I am thinking too much about things. But the other thing is, past experience shows me that this is the best way for me to do it, at least at the moment. The amount of stuff that I've thought about, and I've thought, I'm thinking too much about this, but I always end up resolving it in the end, which might even go into that thing about, like the diamond thing. It's almost like it doesn't matter what path you take, you can spend all your life focusing on drawing, and that might actually resolve all your mental issues. You can spend all your life focusing on your mental issues, and that might resolve yourself to allow you to start drawing with a completely free mind. Yeah. But for me, I see art and the mind as, at least for me, they are very much entangled with each other. Because the mind is very much an analytical thing, whereas art is the creative, like the process, the freeness. So I feel like it's a case of balancing them. But I wonder whether that drawing I did, which got the quote, "Art will set you free," is that me talking to myself saying, look, the way you free yourself from your mind is to draw. I do wonder. But this week's inspirational quote, it goes to the artist Jake Spicer from the book Draw People in 15 Minutes. Now this book looks quite cool. It's got a load of drawing exercises in it and stuff. This is cool. I've turned to the page all about negative space. It says, what is negative space? Negative spaces are the shapes around your subject that aren't a part of the subject itself. The spaces between limbs, or between a finger and its environment. When you think of your drawing as a jigsaw, you could imagine that as well as a person-shaped piece, there are many negative-shaped pieces that fit around a person to make up the rectangle of the paper. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. You start realising that everything's interconnected. So reality is like a piece of paper. Everything inside of the piece of paper, because in other words, if you change the negative shapes, you change the actual objects. You change the shape of the objects. Well, it's like that in real life. If you change things which are thoughts, because I feel like the things between, especially like people, the things that connect people are thoughts. So if you change the thoughts, you change the connections, which means you can actually change the objects, which are the people, including yourself. So in other words, if you change yourself, you change the other person, because you're like entangled. So a drawing is the perfect visual representation of entanglement, because you can't change anything on a piece of paper without changing the opposite thing. Like if you change the object, you have to change the negative shapes. If you change the negative shapes, you have to change the objects. So when he says here, the spaces, he says negative spaces are the shapes around your subject that aren't a part of the subject itself, but it is a part of the drawing. It says here, look, seeing negative shapes around the figure will help you during the construction stage, particularly if you're having trouble working out how to draw a part of the body. Now this is the other thing. So if you're at life drawing class and you're focusing on drawing, because I went life drawing 2 nights ago, and there was one moment where I was struggling to draw something, and I suddenly saw the negative shape between the legs. So I drew that, and then I drew the leg. because what happens is the mind is basically, when you look at the negative shapes, you free yourself from the mind. Because if you're trying to draw the leg, the mind will start saying, this is what a leg looks like. And it's actually putting you off of just looking. When you're drawing a negative shape, the mind can't say anything, because the mind can't say it should be like this, because it's a random shape. So you end up just drawing it. And because you draw that, and because everything's interconnected, you end up drawing the leg. So the funny thing is, you can draw objects more accurately by drawing everything else around the object. How weird is that? And again, this is a sort of way that the paradoxes of art, it makes you start seeing reality, because everything's full of paradoxes. So this week's inspirational quote, I love this. It says, as kids, we all draw and paint, but as teenagers, we can become so self-conscious about drawing that by adulthood, we have talked ourselves out of it altogether. Yeah. So even in here, it's basically showing you that the mind is the only thing stopping you from being an amazing artist, in my opinion, is the mind. Because it's not just the art either, it's about your social skills. In other words, the only thing stopping you from being your absolute perfect self is the mind. I feel like if the mind was taken out of the picture, everyone would be fearless. So they would be living their highest self. So this week's inspirational quote: as kids we can all draw and paint, but as teenagers we become so self-conscious about drawing that by adulthood we have talked ourselves out of it altogether. Jake Spicer.